It is the 582nd year of the Second Era. The drums of war are sounding. This is where our journey begins.
Hello, and welcome to Beta Whale's review of the Elder Scrolls Online. I am Connor.
And I'm Jordan.
And how I'll structure this is reviewing the game in three categories: graphics and sound, gameplay, and game mechanics.
I didn't agree to any of this.
Well, too bad. So to start off in graphics and sound, I'll kick it off with graphics. The graphics in Elder Scrolls Online is very true to other Elder Scrolls styles. Within Ultra, it's very easy to immerse yourself within the beautiful graphics all around you. However, you may experience lag in town, which will force lower settings. And although the character creation is very vast, gives you a lot of options to customize your character, don't expect to actually feel unique once you enter the game. You're going to see a lot of beige and a lot of gray.
Yeah, touching on that point, I really wish I could play this game in Ultra because it is very pretty, but it's just it's not possible. It just tears my computer apart. In regards to sound, they had some pretty impressive voice actors for this. They had Michael Gambon, which was Dumbledore from the Harry Potter series. He plays a pretty main character in this. He says things like "Vistage" a lot. Vistage. They also had Kevin Michael Richardson, which was from the Cleveland show. So they have some big name voice actors. But again, going back to character creation, don't expect that from the voices that you can pick for your character. Like, it sounds like they got squeezed a dog. And I think that ultimately the sound of opening doors and the combat system, it makes the game it does enhance the game. So.
Right. I love that every single quest has character actors for it. I mean, yes, you start to notice some similarities between the voices, but it does really help on that point of immersing you into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about gameplay, and I'm going to start it off by talking about PvE, which is kind of a big area, but I think that there is a huge opportunity with PvE. It's just very quest-driven, and that can get to be kind of boring at times. They do encourage you to kind of go off in random directions to find, to explore, and I'm using air quotes. You can't see it, but I'm using air quotes. But what that really does is you go off in random directions to find more quests. Things do get a little bit more exciting when you start doing dungeons. Granted, I haven't done that many. I've only really done one. But it kind of ramps up the difficulty and makes it a little bit more interesting to break up the monotony of questing. Wouldn't you agree, Connor?
I would. And dungeons are actually one of my favorite elements right now because it is the most challenging. And the sense of Elder Scrolls doesn't have specific healer or tank classes, although you definitely can build some that way. You find that you have to adapt how you play the game depending on each situation, and I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So keeping with combat, I'll talk about PvP. So PvP in Elder Scrolls is a huge open map, constant back and forth ownership of resources and buildings, and it's very similar to Guild Wars 2, if you've played that PvP before. And one of the pluses is that there's always something going on. It's such a huge map, there's always a fight somewhere, but you'll end up spending a lot of your time traveling between those somewheres. And while that's more realistic in sense of lore and immersion, it ends up being there's a lot fewer options for PvP, and it's not my favorite right now.
Yeah, I really do think that PvP was kind of an afterthought here. I mean, it's just so much like Guild Wars. And what ends up happening is that there's no one-on-one kind of combat. It's you're in a big swarm of people fighting other big swarms of people, and whoever has the biggest swarm of people wins.
Yeah, it's zerging to the win.
That might change later in game, but right now it just feels very boring. So, but yeah, let's move on to crafting. Crafting, I think, is kind of a redeeming quality of the game early stages. I don't know what it's like end game, but crafting at this point, you get an abundance of just raw material. So if you're making staves, you get a ton of wood. I mean, they're all over the place. Once you know what to look for, you get a million of them. Where the real bottleneck is at what's called style components. And the reason why that's a bottleneck is because, one, you can't really harvest them. You have to kind of get them from gear that you disenchant or destroy. And you don't automatically know all styles, so it's very difficult to craft things with that. And so I'll be really interested to see what it's like end game. But right now, I think that it really adds something to the game and makes crafting necessary.
Yeah, and I don't mind crafting. It's just not quite a selling point for me. The bottleneck with the style components and the fact that inventory management right now in the game is so horrible, I kind of dislike having to craft.
Yeah, I do see that.
And on that note, with inventory, I'll talk about, I guess, economy of the game. And so first focusing on the act of actually moving and selling goods, it's kind of challenging. Your only option right now is to spam zone chat in hopes that people will find your offer and want to whisper you to trade. There are elements of guild stores that you can manage, but ultimately you really only have the top 5 or so guilds being able to leverage this trading system. And so what ends up happening is the rich get richer, guilds become huge, and for the individual seller, it's a big barrier to selling your goods. And I wouldn't even mind having to off my lumber or my ore in 20 stacks at a time, but the inventory management and storage in the game are so limiting that you'll be full. Your inventory will be full within the first few hours of playing the game, and it's so cumbersome and upsetting to have to delete your items because you just don't have room for them.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff you pick up though is worth nothing. It's worth something because you have it already, but it's worth literally no gold if you sell it. In regards to the guild kind of aspect of trading, I do think I see what they were trying to do, but I think it's such a miss. I really want there to be a necessity for a more intimate type of guild and not this big, kingpin type of style guilds, which is what is currently there. Moving right along, we have our next category, which is game mechanics. We're gonna start talking about how it feels to actually play the game, and I'm gonna talk about combat. And a lot of it might just be because the game is brand new, but combat is really clunky, and most of that could be attributed to just bugs in the code. When it's working properly, it feels very natural. It feels very satisfying to, I'm a ranger, so I can shoot an arrow and then run up and then stab them in the face and then they fall over. It's very gratifying. But more often than not, that bugs out. And I think it's also important to note too that the difference between, say, Skyrim and this is that if you shot an arrow at an enemy and they moved to the side a little bit, you missed them completely. Whereas now it's more of like a homing missile. This arrow kind of comes in from the side and makes you feel a little bit more like it's an MMO that you can lock on a target. And I feel like that just kind of makes the game feel pretty repetitive and like there's no skill involved.
Yeah, they definitely simplified some of the mechanics to make it, I think, in MMO, like healing isn't targeted. It's almost all kind of AoE, like just around you elements. And I've noticed the same bugs, like as a melee user and a Templar, charging in on somebody, more times than not, I charge in past them and then have to manually turn around and then start hitting them again. So I would love to see those kind of fixed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then on the interface side of things, Elder Scrolls does a pretty good job here. You don't need to relearn any hotkeys. They do a good job of using kind of the standards to open up map and inventory and things like that. And for the amount of information that Elder Scrolls actually has to deliver, like we're talking 10 plus skill trees, tons of different questing and lore book breakdowns, you are still able to manage and navigate those interfaces pretty easily. And so they've done a good job at making it relatively simple to get through to things. My biggest qualm, though, in the interface space is auto loot. I love to pick up stuff. I'm an item hoarder, and auto loot is something that seems so simple to execute on that Elder Scrolls has ultimately failed on in my book.
Yeah.
Yes, they've added auto loot as a feature. However, it doesn't display anywhere what you picked up as you pick it up. And so you're going through just looting things like crazy, and ultimately I don't know what I'm picking up. I have to manually open up my inventory to see what's new versus just a little window that would just show like, hey, these are the things you've been picking up, or show it in chat. Like, some way of notifying me would be just perfect.
Yeah, I know that for other people that's kind of a minor issue. For you, it's a huge issue.
Huge.
But yeah, I agree. There's really no reason why they can't display that. All right, it's grade card time.
Woo!
So for me, I'll just go down the list. Graphics and sound, I gave it an 8. I would like to see music be integrated into more of the game to enhance it, and I really want to play on Ultra.
I know you do.
Gameplay, I'm going to give it a 7. Gameplay can get kind of boring for me at sometimes, but a lot of that has to do with it's just very, very quest driven, and I do like a heavy storyline, but there's no variation to the story a lot of times. It's pretty repetitive. Game mechanics, I give it a 7 also, because, and this will probably improve, but there's just a lot of bugs. This game was not polished at launch, as much as you would expect from a big title. So overall, this game is a 7 for me.
So we have a lot of the same ratings, but kind of for different reasons. In graphics and sound, I give it an 8 as well, but more in the sense of I would like my character to look unique. I don't want somebody with like long purple hair and dragon wings, but I don't think it's too much to ask for some more gear sets to make myself at least a little bit more customizable.
Yeah.
In gameplay, I'm going to go with a 6 on here. PvE, I think, is done well. I am interested, and it's kind of like playing through a narrative. However, the other factors of Elder Scrolls, like PvP having too much travel time, not enough combat or options, the economy having a huge barrier to get involved in if you're not in a huge guild, are things that are going to take away from a lot of the core game features. And then lastly, mechanics, I'll go 7 as well. There are some glitches, some quests that you can't complete, which I think should be fixed, and probably will be. But biggest qualm here is that auto loot. I would really like for them to fix that, because I just can't live with it.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath on that. Stop it.
Oh, no.
So just overall impression of the game. When I heard that they were doing this, I kind of had this idea of an MMO and Skyrim getting together, having really raunchy sex, and having a baby. It was a good blend of the two. And it feels like they took two things and just mashed them together. So you could still kind of pick out which is which, and they don't quite work together the way I'd like them to. Overall, I think it's a solid game, though.
Yeah, Elder Scrolls Online is not Skyrim with friends, and that's something that I had hoped for and expected, but it's just not the case. But if you're looking at it from an MMO's perspective, it does do a decent job at using standard MMO features and then just imbuing a lot of Elder Scrolls elements into it. And so overall, I give it a 77. Just a
77. 77.
Just one of those sevens.
On that note, that concludes our review. We're going to be doing a couple analysis videos to just kind of give you some more in-depth conversation on some of the aspects of the game. But keep an eye out for those.
Totes.
Bye.